Good morning, I'm Angelo Castro III.
I'm Angela, and we are the Castros.
We bring you the news.
And the views that make you think.
Sometimes we agree.
Sometimes we don't.
This is News and Views.
And here are today's headlines.
The Office of the Prosecutor at the International Criminal Court is urging Pretrial Chamber 1 to deny former President Rodrigo Duterte's request for interim release.
The House prosecution team has received Vice President Sara Duterte's formal response to the Senate summons.
Missiles continue to rain down on Israeli cities despite the United States' announcement of a ceasefire.
The government stands ready to release fuel subsidies for the public transport sector amid high oil prices.
First in the news, the International Criminal Court's prosecutor is pushing back against former President Rodrigo Duterte's bid for temporary freedom. Here's the report.
The Office of the Prosecutor has urged the ICC to deny former President Rodrigo Duterte's request for interim release, citing multiple risks and threats. Prosecutors argued that Duterte must remain in custody to ensure he stands trial and to prevent any possible obstruction of justice. His continued detention, they said, is essential to protect the integrity of the court's process. They also pointed to Duterte's continued political influence and strong networks as potential tools to interfere with investigations or intimidate witnesses. The prosecution highlighted his past encouragement of extrajudicial killings and his open defiance of the ICC as clear risks if he were released before trial. ICC Assistant to Counsel Attorney Cristina Conti dismissed Duterte's request for interim release as a mere bluff.
Their submission seems to put that the prosecutor had already agreed with them and that there was already a country committed at least to host him during his interim release. It felt as if it was a done deal or something that is, in Filipino, we call it arreglado na. But now, thanks for the clarification from the Office of the Prosecutor, apparently, this was a bluff. And the prosecutor has called it.
Meanwhile, President Bongbong Marcos took an apparent swipe at Duterte's drug war. He said his administration's peaceful and bloodless approach to the war on drugs is already yielding good results. The latest is the nearly 9 billion pesos worth of shabu discovered by fishermen floating in waters off Luzon.
It has been described as a bloodless war on drugs, and that is what we are aiming for. But nonetheless, despite the fact that we do not kill people that are just suspected of having anything to do with drugs, imbis na ganyan ang ginagawa natin, we are handling the drug problem in a different way.
And to talk more about this development in the ICC, we have with us Attorney Cristina Conti. Attorney, thank you for joining us once again here on our program.
Good morning, Angelo, Angela.
All right, Attorney, I know we've been talking about this for a long time, this issue about the interim release, but at least maybe you can explain to us and our viewers, what are the usual grounds for granting interim release in certain cases like this?
Well, one ground would be you are committed to proceed with trial and that you will not obstruct or hinder the trial. Another aspect would be why you need a release. And in most cases, their main claim is that the interim release is a right of the accused under international law. We agree with that on some points, but there are factors that mitigate against interim release. And essentially, we can collapse this into 3 points. 1, would you show up for trial? 2, would you not interfere or obstruct any of the proceedings? And 3, would you not continue to commit crimes or continue with the commission of the previous crimes? And these are the 3 major grounds of the prosecutor in opposing the interim release of Duterte. There's a 4th point which talks about risks, but essentially the discussion revolved around the main 3 points.
Right. Attorney, ako naman, I want to know your reaction to the recent statement of the prosecution regarding the requests of interim release by the Duterte's camp, knowing that they use yung mga words and actions ng mga Dutertes to block his release. example, his rants, yung violence committed allegedly by his common law wife, Hanlet Advencenia, the statements regarding kidnappings. Your thoughts on that?
Well, as we've said, you cannot trust Duterte and his words. He says this, and he's been on record, caught on record on so many times saying violent activities or inciting to violence his supporters. And on the other hand, in this request, para siyang maamong tupa. Ngayon nabalatan na yon. And the prosecution has pointed that out clearly, squarely, that the words of Duterte would be inconsistent with his request for release. It's important also to point out that yung third point about committing crimes, Duterte apparently said that when he sits in as mayor of Davao, the number of killings will double. So that's his hometown, that's his kingdom, fiefdom, so to speak. Na doon niya sinimulan ang, kaya nga Davao Death Squad, kaya DDS. So doon niya sinimulan yon, and he said when he's going to return as mayor, he will double the killings. The prosecutor, tongue-in-cheek, points this out. The defenses, well, tingnan nyo ngayon sa Davao, wala namang namamatay, or konti lang yung namamatay. And the prosecutor says, well, precisely because Duterte is in jail and is not sitting as mayor of Davao. So for them, it's plenty clear. There's evidence militating, or there's evidence to oppose the warrant, the issuance of the granting of interim release against Duterte.
Attorney, I'd like to clarify something now. Who has or who is, let me rephrase, who is responsible for the safety of the main witnesses, not in victim witnesses but actual witnesses during this trial? The reason why I ask you this is because one point being raised is obstruction of justice possible, or tampering with the witnesses, or influence over witnesses, na baka si Duterte may influence. If it's in the Philippines, definitely meron siyang influence over that. But hindi ba pag baka erase yan, nasa ano naman protection ng ICC. So paano magkakaroon ng influence si PRRD, FPRRD sa mga witnesses?
The major unit that's in charge of the witnesses would be the Witnesses and Victims Unit. So actually, kung yung victim witness ay kakargohin na rin yon ng Victims and Witness Unit. Kasi classified na siya as a witness. Lahat ng witnesses technically under siya ng Office of the Prosecutor, or handled sila ng Office of the Prosecutor. Pero may special unit for Witnesses and Victims Unit. Problem, they can only do as much as the states would allow them, meaning yung member states where these victims are.
Member states?
Essentially, yeah. But I mean, if the Philippines, if the witnesses were in the Philippines and were not a member state, at the least, they would cooperate in terms of turnover, paglipat sa ibang bansa. Kaya, ang hirap, no? Kasi sa totoo, ang policy ng ICC sa witnesses, stay where you are. That's the least harm that you can do. Kasi diba iba yung trauma ng namatayan ka na nga, alis ka pa ng bahay mo, mawawalay ka pa dun sa ibang kapamilya. So from what I understand, their parang first major approach is in-country, if ever, relocation. In-country support or relocation. But if the Philippines is not a member state, then I would say that the ICC has taken out most of the witnesses and brought them to ICC member countries. And then also there's a problem with, I think, with even for myself, I look at this sometimes as parang yung victims or witnesses protection unit ng ibang bansa yung nakikita sa TV, where you are relocated, given you identities, etc. That's not possible with the ICC, because they can only provide protection. They cannot provide permanent, perpetual protection. They can only do as much as the countries allow them. And in general, the protection is only for the scope of the trial. Kaya kung maalala natin, si Bato at si Las Cañas, si Las Cañas rather, nag-claim na ako, witness na ako ng ICC. And then he said he was offered only limited protection or limited immunity. Because at that time, talagang hindi pa naman nagsisimula ang quote-unquote trial.
Yes.
Maski naman ngayon ang tawag pa lang natin ay preliminary or pre-trial proceedings. Kaya, kumbaga, limitado yung protection program. Kaya,
Okay.
talagang may chance pa itong Duterte camp. And
Influence.
I'm not just talking about Duterte himself. We're talking about his associates, which was heavily referenced in the document. The Duterte Death Squad, which could have splintered off. I don't know who their leader is now, pero they could have splintered groups, tapos kanya-kanya ng galawan, kanya-kanya ng pagtatago, kanya-kanya ng pag-operate.
Yeah.
Pwedeng ganon. And I would like to point out to the ICC as well, their supporters, which are out there everywhere and threatening, sort of, and warning that they will camp out wherever they will find Duterte. And because we cannot vouch for all of them, hindi mo naman masasabi na, okay naman lahat ng yan. That's a security risk, additional security risk for the president, I would say.
Pero,
Given that in The Hague,
yeah.
the residents there have had experiences with this group. Hindi naman kasi sila, they're individual persons and I don't know what they will do at one point or another.
What speaking of witnesses and victims, attorney, ano po ba yung pinaka-role ng victims when it comes to the ICC's assessment process? Are their voices legally weighed in or at this point ano lang po sila, symbolic lang sila dun sa proseso?
Thank you, Angela. Important yan kasi na-realize yan ng international courts na ano nga bang role ng victims liban sa magpatunay dun sa kaso or insidente. Pero sa kaso katulad nitong crimes against humanity, hindi mo kailangan na ipresenta ang 30,000, 7,000, etc. Kahit ilan lang maprepresenta. Sabi ng ICC in particular, we will allow them to raise their views and concerns. So ang kanilang mga pananaw at mga pag-aagam-agam during the proceedings. We can even give them time to, in some cases, cross-examine witnesses, even present witnesses. Kung sa Pilipinas, ang itsura kasi ng biktima, magpapatunay ng civil damages. Diba? May ganong aspect.
Yes.
So yung criminal, si prosecutor, isang team lang yan, prosecutor, tsaka kasama niya yung victims. Pero ipapatawag niya yung kaanak para patunayan, kano bang kinikita niyan? Ano bang nawala sa inyo? Magkano ba yung ginastos nyo?
Yeah.
Kahit itong kamag-anak, hindi nakita yung insidente. So here, it's something similar in the ICC, but more. Not only the civil damages or what happened to you, but also the pain and their views and concerns as to particular incidents. Katulad nito, interim release, victims will be called to weigh in. It's important because for the ICC, they also look at this from the viewpoint of, and this is a term they use, will all these be served in the interests of justice?
Yeah. Pero attorney, I'd like to ask, kasi regarding the safety of the victims or the possible witnesses, kasi we all know that this case might take more than 3 years, 5, 7. Ang problema kasi, even though hindi credible or direct threat si FPRRD sa life nila after this administration na, okay, ngayon, sige, si PBBM admin may be on the side of the ICC, not directly. Ang problema, we have a presidential election looming with the daughter, VP Sara, who is bound to be a possible presidential. Ang fear ng iba is baka naman ibang matauhan bigla ang mga ibang witnesses na, teka lang, palapit na ang eleksyon. Baka I should hold back my statement dahil yari ako. So what can now the Philippine government do, assuming na within 3 years baka mangyari ngayon to secure the lives of these witnesses? Could they be turned over voluntarily to another state or another country that is allied with the ICC or still with the ICC?
Yes, that could be a good suggestion. Ang problema nga lang, dapat papayag din talaga yung tao. Pero yung biktima, i-characterize ko din, not all of them have the capacity to live abroad. They don't have support systems. They don't have money. And they don't have, in some cases, they don't have the skills that are required by that country for migration or kung ano man. Kaya uh, ako ang nakikita ko lang is full cooperation with the ICC. And in fact, i-push na natin, why don't the Philippines join the ICC so that we are bound under our laws to cooperate fully with any investigation and pending proceedings. That option of, kumbaga, turning over or in a sense, ibibigay mo yung ibang tao, parang lalong nakikita ko na lalong mawawasak yung buhay ng tao
Yeah.
when the main point with this trial supposedly is to repair the damage, allow them to live their lives as before, parang yung dati pa rin, nang meron lang dagdag na kunyari hindi ko nga masabing danyos, kasi pag danyos parang binayaran mo yung buhay, hindi kailangan ito ay collectively we process. Tapos yung konsepto kasi ng crimes against humanity, hindi siya simpleng murder, 1, 2, 3. Ito ay collective na naganap. Kaya yung healing process hindi lang para sa biktima, kundi para rin dun sa mga nambiktima. And I would say that the Philippine government at this point, even without being a member of the ICC, has to proceed with domestic processes, prosecution, investigation of small fish. Kung yung big fish titirahin ng ICC, dapat dito meron tayong programa o pagsilip man lang doon sa ginawa ng tinatawag nila na small fish. Kaya yun yung pangkalahatan na programa dapat for reparations in this case.
Attorney, lastly, kasi correct me if I'm wrong, what we are seeing right now is a request from the defense, tapos statement ng prosecution, pero wala pa talaga tayong decision from the ICC court itself. Ano po ba ang mangyayari yung sa proseso natin if the motion is denied? What could mean for the pace of the case? And let's say, for example, nag-grant yung yung request ng defense. Yung confirmation of charges that will be on September 23 is set in stone na po ba yun?
Kind of set in stone. The only other factor that would affect that ay hindi itong interim release. So it will proceed whether nasa labas siya or nasa loob ng detention facility. But what would affect it would be anything that works on the merits of the case, which would be yung exchange of information nila, exchange of evidence. We're looking at 2 schedules. So July 1, that is the general disclosure deadline of the prosecution and defense. Ano yung mga ebidensya na meron kayo at ihaharap sa September, magpakitaan na kayo. Then July 4 is the release of the DCC, the document containing the charges. This is equivalent to our information or sakdal. Ito yung parang charge sheet. The document containing the charges will set forth what are the acts that will be attributed to Duterte. Right now, we're looking at murders, so extrajudicial killings. But the prosecutor could very well put back. Remember that in their warrant of arrest, they are also alleged there were incidents of torture, incidents of rape. They could also add, remember that were thousands arrested. Imprisonment, it's also an act of crimes against humanity. So we're very, short of saying excited, we're waiting for that because that's what we will have to look at for the rest of the trial. So as early as July, we have that document. If we don't have that, baka yun yung factor para ma-push back yung September.
Quickly lang before I let you go, Attorney, I'd like to ask, meron pa bang susunod na warrants of arrest na tuloy pa ba daw ang kay Senator Bato and if possible, kailan daw?
Well, we would hope so. Yung kay Senator Bato, we had thought it would have been effected right after the arrest of Duterte. But kasi it's very obvious that he's a co-conspirator. But, well, we just have to be patient. Hopefully, the investigation into the Philippine situation is not yet over. It's not yet closed. Kaya tuloy-tuloy talaga yan hanggang malaman nila sino ang pinaka mga responsable. Hopefully, after September, the prosecutor can get back to it. Kumbaga, in terms of prioritization, maybe now they're focusing on coming up with the DCC, the document. Then by September, they're preparing the charges. I would hope within the year,
Okay.
will have another arrest.
All right, we will continue to get in touch with you regarding this issue. But for the meantime, thank you, as always, for your insights, Attorney Cristina Conti.
Thank you very much. Ingat.
All right, to more news. After submitting her answer ad cotelam to the Senate, the House Prosecution Panel, through its spokesperson, voiced a sharp criticism, claiming Vice President Sara Duterte failed to address the core allegations. Mobile journalist Amy Atienza has a report.
Impeachment spokesperson Attorney Odi Bukoy already left his remarks after Vice President Sara Duterte answered ad cotelam to the Senate regarding her impeachment case.
Yung kanyang sagot, wala ho siyang factual nor legal grounds ukol doon sa mga factual allegations ng impeachment complaint. It was all procedural.
The House of Representatives already received a copy of Vice President Sara Duterte's answer ad cotelam last Monday, June 23. The document presented by the Vice President insists the impeachment court to dismiss her impeachment case. Reasons include violating one-year bar rule under the Constitution, lack of ultimate facts in the articles of impeachment, and citing an abuse of the impeachment process. For Attorney Bukoy, this is what the House Prosecution Panel has expected from the Vice President.
Predictable po eh. Sa mga naging pangyayari ng mga nakaraang araw bago siya naglahad ng kanyang sagot, inaasahan na po namin ito na she will file something like this. Patuloy niyang hindi kikilalanin ang jurisdiction ng impeachment court at maninindigan siya na walang jurisdiction.
Bukoy added that the answer ad cotelam means that VP Sara does not recognize the jurisdiction of the impeachment court. Regardless, the lower chamber plans to reply on the Vice President's answer.
Magpapile kami ng reply. Ang deadline namin ay sa Sabado, pero palagay ko handa kaming sumagot ng mas maaga.
During the press conference, Bukoy mentioned that the insisted dismissal of the impeachment case was not a bloodbath they expected from VP Sara. What remains now for the House Prosecution Panel is for the impeachment trial to continue. Bukoy cleared that their main role for the current case of VP Sara is to prove the allegations of their filed charges, which are based on facts as seen on the impeachment articles.
Matutuloy ang trial because meron ng sagot. Kung ang sagot niya ay ganyan lang, yan ho ay kanyang kakulangan. Hindi po papel ng prosecution na punuan ang kanyang kakulangan.
Mobile journalist Amy Atienza, we are One News.
President Marcos brushes off criticism from Vice President Sara Duterte over his administration's handling of the West Philippine Sea dispute. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the president expected such remarks from the Dutertes, who are, quote, pro-China. This comes after Duterte slammed the U.S. deployment of the Typhoon missile systems in the Philippines and accused the Marcos administration of lacking vision and preparedness for war or global shocks.
The president said, we expect that from the Dutertes because they are pro-China. At ang Pangulo po ay pro-Philippines.
We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. Good morning. You're still watching News and Views here on One News. Tel Aviv is accusing Iran of breaking the ceasefire as the latter continues to strike Israeli cities with missiles. Here's the report.
Israel's military has confirmed that a ceasefire is now in effect, carried out under the orders of its political leadership. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump brokered an agreement aimed at pausing hostilities between Israel and Iran. Shortly after, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced on social media that Israel had agreed to Trump's proposed truce. Despite this, Israeli forces remain on high alert, bracing for the possibility of renewed missile attacks. An Iranian official has likewise confirmed acceptance of the ceasefire. Though earlier, Iran's foreign minister insisted there would be no cessation unless Israel stopped its attacks. President Trump in turn urged both sides to honor the agreement. But just hours after the ceasefire was made public, sirens were heard across Haifa, Israel. Then came explosions, this time near Tel Aviv and Beersheba city. Israeli media reported that a residential building had been struck. The missile strike killed at least 3 people and left widespread destruction, with rescue workers still combing through rubble for survivors. In retaliation, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz ordered military strikes on Tehran, claiming Iran had violated the ceasefire. Iranian state television, however, denied any breach, saying the last of their missiles were launched before the truce took effect. As the conflict deepens, nuclear experts warn of a more alarming issue: the likelihood that Iran is edging closer to building nuclear weapons.
So what the IAEA found just before they sort of made the declaration, is they've got 400 kilograms of 60% enriched. That would give you sort of 300 odd of 90% enriched for your bomb. You need about 25 kgs for a bomb. So they, potentially they had enough material for 10 bombs. What's not known is, have they converted the 400 kgs of 60%, which the IAEA saw, have they converted it to 90%? If they did, it's of the form of UF6.
Since Israel's June 13 strike on Iranian nuclear sites, the International Atomic Energy Agency has been unable to conduct inspections. Adding to global tensions, Iran's parliament is pushing to close the Strait of Hormuz, a key transit point for the world's oil supply. The move, however, is still pending approval from Iran's Supreme National Security Council.
31 overseas Filipino workers from the Middle East have returned home, with 50 more set to arrive in the coming days as the government continues its voluntary repatriation efforts. Here's the report.
31 overseas Filipino workers from the Middle East returned to the Philippines on Tuesday night, June 24. Of the 31 repatriates, 26 came from Israel, 3 from Jordan, 1 from Palestine, and 1 from Qatar. Another 50 OFWs are expected to arrive on June 26 or 27. So far, the Department of Migrant Workers has received a total of 311 repatriation requests.
We have 30,000 plus OFWs in Israel. And the number that OIC Secretary Bai just said, about 311, that's around roughly 1%, right? But since there was an imposition of alert level 3, what I think yung umakyat is the confirmed repatriation. Why? Because we do receive calls. Our embassy, our offices, OWA, and DMW. But after those calls of initial repatriation, we call them back if they are really sure that they want to be repatriated. So based on those calls, we have confirmed, of course, the first 26, and then this additional 50, and then another 20.
All returning OFWs are entitled to 150,000 pesos in immediate financial assistance, 75,000 pesos each from OWA and the DMW. They will also receive additional support from DSWD, DOH, and TESDA.
So, iba-iba naman ang services that will be offered by the different government offices. Ang importante dito, ang una nating mantra o yung una nating kailangan gawin is to assure the safety of our Filipino workers.
Meanwhile, 470 OFWs in Israel have already received various forms of aid, ranging from financial assistance and temporary shelter to food packs and hygiene kits. The DMW is also studying the feasibility of chartering a flight for future repatriations. DMW and OWA stressed that assistance is extended to both documented and undocumented OFWs. OWA also reminded the public not to spread false information, especially with 270,000 OFWs currently in Qatar, where a U.S. base is located. The agencies assured the public they are ready should the government raise the alert to level 4 and confirm that there is sufficient funding for any repatriation effort.
Sapat at kung hindi man, nandiyan naman ang DMW. Magkatulong kasi kami ng DMW ang ERF at saka Action Fund combined para sa ating mga OFWs.
Hindi po tayo magkukulang sapagkat meron po tayong Action Fund and isa po yan sa purpose ng Action Fund for repatriation and for evacuation. The Action Fund is also for legal assistance, for medical assistance, not only on warlike situations, but also to answer for the labor and legal cases of our Filipino workers, and also for the matter on the legal retainers.
For News 5, Laila Pangilinan, we are One News.
Alright, so we are currently contacting ang DFA spokesperson, Undersecretary Ede Vega, to give us more details about this. But yun nga, ang government natin is eyeing the possibility to charter a flight para mapauwi ng mas mabilis yung ating mga kababayan mula sa Israel or Iran. But hindi ganun din kadali because there are permits and other documents that they need to secure before doing this. Also, we also want to know ano yung mga factors that would lead to shifting yung alert levels natin to mandatory evacuation. Kasi as of now, we're still in alert level 3.
Based kasi yung, update natin sa One News socials natin, social media accounts, nag-lift ang Israel ng state of emergency. In other cases, usually, sa isang bansa na lift, bumababa ang, I'm not saying sa Middle East, bumababa ang emergency levels. Ang problema kasi, this is a temporary ceasefire or truce. Hindi to permanent truce. So with that, meron pa rin agam-agam, even with a ceasefire in place, a temporary ceasefire in place, na baka anytime this could ignite. Therefore, kailangan natin makita sa Department of Foreign Affairs, ano ang magiging tugon natin in regards to, shall we maintain the level ng emergency level natin? Shall we downgrade it for the meantime? Or talagang until we see a permanent resolution, di ba, we keep things status quo?
Kasi ngayon, di ba, first, a couple of days ago, yung ibang mga Filipinos natin, medyo nag-i-increase yung ng numbers ng mga Pilipino natin na gusto na umuwi. Decidido na umuwi because of what's happening. But right now, may mga reports din tayo saying na medyo nagdadalawang isip na naman sila. Number 1, because the strikes are getting weaker. Number 2 naman, yung safety nila, of course, traveling by land, yun din yung iniisip nila. So, yun yung mga agam-agam ng mga OFWs natin na caught in between, this conflict between Israel and Iran.
Karami naman gusto magstay lang naman sa Iran o Israel, yung mga may family na na Pinoy or may business already there.
And plus yung yung mga OFWs natin, yung mga caregivers, kasi ayaw nilang iwan yung mga patients nila, 'di ba? Yung konsensya nila na iwan nila habang nagkakaroon ng bombahan doon hindi nila magawa. Isa yun sa mga reasons. Anyway, to talk more about the repatriation of OFWs in the Middle East, we have DFA Undersecretary Ede Vega joining us again today. Good morning, Yusek.
Good morning, magandang araw.
Okay, so we were talking about po yung mga proseso po dito. Can you give us details about it? Katulad na lamang po nitong 150,000 financial aid na ibibigay po sa ating mga OFW sa babalik po dito sa ating bansa.
Ito po ay pinangako ng migrant workers, department. At kagabi, may dumating na 26 from Israel plus 5 more galing Jordan and Qatar and Palestine. Na-delay dahil nagkaroon nga ng temporary closure ng airspace Qatar. Pero nakarating din kagabi kasama po si Secretary ng Qatar. Doon mismo sa airport, binigay sila ng 150,000 pesos each. At saka nangako yung ibang department, like DOH nandun din, na kung kailangan ng health assistance, psychosocial assistance kaya bibigay. No? So, ito po yung inikayat namin sa mga Pilipino na pag umuwi sila under voluntary repatriation program, hindi basta kung nabigyan yung plano ng ticket, tapos uwi dito, tapos bahala na kayo. May financial year. Saka reintegration din, meaning, tutulungan sila maghanap ng trabaho dito at pwede naman silang ma-deploy sa ibang bansa kung gusto pa nila. So, ganun po. Totoo po yun, yung 150,000 pesos.
Yeah. Just wanna clear this lang po, Yusek. This is a one-time assistance na ibibigay sa kanila, itong 150,000. And pagbalik po nila dito, ilang araw yung aantayin nila to process this para po makuha nila kaagad itong 150,000 na financial aid?
You can consult BMW and OWA better in it. Pero ang practically, pag uwi dito, doon mismo sa airport binibigay.
Okay.
Doon mismo sa airport binibigay. Yan ang experience namin pag sumasalubong kami ng OWs. Doon mismo binibigay. Of course, tutuloy yung pangalan, may papapirma. Pero kung hindi doon, certainly within a few days, na-receive na nila. Pwede rin na dinadala sila sa DMW mismo. It's something na kung hindi, you can consult Secretary Kakdak and his team. But that's something na pinangako niya, utos ni Presidente, yung kailangan tulungan sila. One time, no? Kasi may umaasa na, let's be frank, no? Minsan yung mga Pilipino sabi, pag uuwi ako, tutulungan niya ba ako? Ang ibig nila sabihin, parang pensionado na, no, we cannot do that. Merong 110 million Filipinos na iba, no? So in other words, one time, para lang may cash agad sila.
Right.
At saka, may nagsasabi, well, hindi malaki yan. 2 buwan o 3 buwan sweldo lang yan dito sa Israel. Kaya nga voluntary po, hindi namin hugutin kahit pilitin umuwi.
That's right.
Yusek, given po yung truce or yung temporary ceasefire in place na nangyari po between Israel and Iran, ano po ang magiging tugon ng pamahalaan natin with regards to yung alert level? Status quo po ba or mag-adjust po tayo?
Now, of course, we'll wait for the official statement of the President and the DFA about the ceasefire. Of course, we welcome it. Of course, we've long wanted the escalation tension. Now, about the alert level, ang gumagawa niya hindi basta-basta, inagad, hiningi namin yung payo ng ambassadors. So, now, maaga pa yung ceasefire. So, kung naalala nyo, of course, days ago, weeks ago, nag-umpisa to, sabi, bakit hindi yung ginagawang mandatory, meaning bakit hindi forced evacuation, hindi na voluntary. Kaya sabi namin, hindi pa tayo umabot sa sitwasyon na talagang breakdown na kasi nagtatamaan ng missile, pero kung walang missile attacks, yung buhay sa Tel Aviv o sa Tehran, sa lugar, may pagka as normal as can be, no? So, sabi namin, at saka ayaw pa umuwi. So, voluntary lang. Kaya hindi namin, imagine mo kung ginawa namin mandatory noon, yun pala magkakaroon ng peace, no? So, baliktad naman ngayon.
Yeah.
Merong ceasefire. Huwag tayo mamadali na ibalik na wala ng voluntary repatriation. In other words, yes, of course, palaging may review yan, palaging pwedeng ibaba.
Yeah.
Hintay namin, huwag na tayo maging mamadali. Pagdasalan natin mag-hold yan. Mamiyang konti, bukas, next week, nagbabarila na naman. So, certainly, we will consider lowering it sa the previous levels based on the advice of ambassadors actually on the ground na ang kanilang basehan, yung nakikita nila mismo doon at hindi dahil sa sinasabi sa BBC o CNN or whatever foreign news outlet.
Yusek, buti you mentioned on the ground. Ano po ang sentiment ng mga tao natin on the ground sa Israel and Iran in terms of yung volatility? Is it life normal lang ang day-to-day nila or medyong ano na sila, guarded na sila?
Okay, sa Israel, depende yan kung gano'ng katagal sila doon. Yung mga more than 3 years, 4 years, medyong veterano na. They know it. I mean, this is part of life dito. They accept na minsan-minsan may kailangan with its neighbors. Tapos papapapapapon sila o dahil minsan. Meron naman Iron Dome as well.
Yes.
They accept it. Of course, siyempre lang pamahala. Anybody would be concerned. Pero yung mga newcomers lang, yung wala pang 1 year, or kaya yung mga scholars, Israel always gives scholarships, agricultural training, ano. And yung, dahil bagito lang, medyo kakabahan sila. Pero yung veteran, the majority of the 30,000 are all right. Now, Iran is a different case. Yung Iran, 1,000 plus, wala rin gustong muna. But basically, that's because yung mga Pilipina doon are family members ng Iranian, mga may asawa. Yung 1,000 or so, karamihan, they're not as OFWs. Wala pang 20 na OFW.
Yeah.
Now, yung mga OFW mismo, yung nagtrabaho sa household, ganyan, karamihan, nagpaiwati gusto umuwi. Dahil, siyempre, wala naman silang defense mechanism tulad ng Israel. Pero, yung iba naman Pilipino, lumikas lang ng Tehran, pumunta sa province, pero walang balak makulit na nila. So, good news is, walang mass desire to abandon the country. Pero kung kailangan, nililatasin sila.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that update. Yusek, for now, that will be it muna. Thank you, DFA.
Dala na lang natin matuloy yung case. Kapayawan, mabuhay.
Mabuhay po. Mabuhay po, Yusek. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, DFA Undersecretary Ed De Vega, for joining us.
Now, in other news, the government is ready to release fuel subsidies for the public transport sector as soon as oil hits $80 per barrel. The Energy Department has listed down alternative routes and supplier nations such as the US, Canada, and Brazil, if and when their so-called worst-case scenario happens. On Tuesday, gasoline stations nationwide implemented the first tranche of this week's price hikes, ranging from 1 peso and 75 centavos to almost 3 pesos a liter.
Now let's discuss that further with LTFRB spokesperson, Attorney Ariel Inton. Attorney, thank you for joining us.
Hello?
Yes, Attorney.
Hello?
Can you hear us okay?
Good morning. Good morning po. Good morning sa ating mga taga-subaybay.
Thank you for joining us, Attorney. Go ahead.
Oo, sa ngayon po ba, magkano na po yung natin, yung per barrel nabentahan po ng langis? Kasi sabi daw po, di ba, as soon as the oil hits $80 per barrel, tsaka po natin makukuha yung fuel subsidies.
Okay, the last time I checked, June 23, that was already at, I think, 76.
Okay.
So, it's still below the 80, pero with what is happening right now sa Middle East, then even if we don't like it, baka it might hit the 80 per barrel threshold.
Alright, alam naman po natin na yung mga oil advocates and mga transport groups ay nagsasabi na mas maigi daw, aside from subsidies, ay mas maganda daw po tanggalan na lang daw po muna ng VAT or excise tax itong mga oil natin. Pero hindi daw po ito po pwede. Given the inclusion of non-consolidated PUVs as well, paano po ba natin ma-ensure ng LTFRB na transparent po yung distribution process po natin ng magiging fuel subsidy?
The agency will be coming out with the guidelines pursuant to the directive of Malacanang and pursuant to the directive of Secretary Vince Dizon ng DOTR. So, ito po, minamadali na rin po ng LTFRB. We have may template naman na the template yung the former Tawid Pasada program. So that's the template. Well, the additional feature of this fuel subsidy will be the inclusion of those who are not consolidated yet.
Okay.
Kasama sila. So, operators and drivers of unconsolidated public utility vehicles are included in this fuel subsidy distribution.
Yung so klaruhin ko yan yung sinabi nyo at attorney, no? Kahit hindi consolidated kasama. So ano po ang magiging guidelines para maging eligible to receive yung subsidy? How about po yung supposedly tagged as colorum dahil sa consolidation?
Yung pong guidelines as of now ay fina-finalize po ng LTFRB board. As soon na finalize na po yan and ma-release, then we will know how much, to whom, and how ma-distribute po yung fuel subsidy. As to the transparency, opo, sigurado po yan. The agency will be very transparent dito po sa distribution ng fuel subsidy.
Well, we understand po na sabi nyo nga po, i-roll out pa lang yung proseso dito. Pero do you have any idea how much yung maaaring ibigay dito po sa ating mga beneficiaries, and how are we going to make sure, ensure po na talaga pong mabibigay doon sa mga nararapat na beneficiaries nitong fuel subsidies?
Opo, yun how much, if again we go back to the former program yung Tawid Pasada, so yung amount na yun, I think it's 5,000 or 6,000. So at least we will, meron tayong ballpark figure. But again, I am not authorized or at liberty to say really kung exactly how much is the Pantawid Pasada of each beneficiary. Kasi yan po pinag-uusapan nga po ng mga iba-ibang ahensya at ang guidelines po ay ilalabas pa lang. But as to the coverage, ang coverage po malinaw na PUVs, even, including those who are not consolidated.
Medyo kasi si Marvel Buena po may nasabi sa amin in the interview a few weeks back na meron din silang miyembro na as of now tumigil na po magpasada, pero pag wala daw authorities nagtatago sila, tapos nagbabiyahe sila na parang parang kolorum. Yung mga ganito pong klaseng nagpa-apply ng routes, are they also eligible for yung subsidies?
Yung po kasing usaping kolorum is outside this fuel subsidy program. I mean to say, hindi po yun yung pinagbabasingan.
Yes.
The fuel subsidy is a government policy, a directive of the President, at ang direktiba is walang may iwan.
Okay.
At ang impact nga po nito is not whether kolorum ka or you have a franchise, but you are within the transport sector. So the OTR came out with a very specific statement, no? And I think na lumabas na po sa media yun na consolidation is not required. So kung hindi required yun, then they are included. Whether sila ay yun isang sample nyo po na tumatakbo ng ganon, doesn't matter. Included po yun hindi consolidated sa usapin po ng fuel subsidy.
Alright, maraming salamat po sa inyong oras, Attorney Ariel Inton, ang spokesperson po ng LTFRB. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't go away because we're not done yet. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching News and Views here on One News. Some House lawmakers are drafting a bill to regulate online gambling, citing concerns over rising addiction and financial distress. Bukidnon Representative Jonathan Keith Flores, for one, wants to limit the use of e-wallets. He warned that the ease of topping up is fueling gambling habits, especially among the poor. Meanwhile, Manila Representative Rolando Valeriano is calling for a tougher stance, urging regulators to revoke licenses of online gambling operators and ban e-wallets for payment.
The Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, has approved the creation of 4,000 additional teaching positions for the current school year, completing the government's target of 20,000 new hires in 2025. The move supports President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s directive to reinforce the education sector by ensuring sufficient staffing in public schools. Of the new posts, 1,951 will go to senior high schools, 1,658 to kindergarten and elementary, and 391 to junior high schools. In a related development, the Department of the Interior and Local Government, or DILG, reported that over 77% of local government units have effectively used their special education fund to upgrade classrooms and support learning programs, highlighting a broader push to improve public education nationwide.
A gender-inclusive basketball league in Cebu City is drawing attention for blending competitive sports with vibrant self-expression. Para bigyan ng mukha ang Balita Mobile Journal, Denise Valdesancho.
Basta Pilipinas, Matic Ball is Life. Ang isang paliga sa Talamban, Cebu City, anumang kasarian mo, welcome ka. Aura kung aura ang mga sumali sa basketball game na ito sa Cebu. Pero hindi sila yung muse, sila mismo, ang players. Patok yan sa mga nakapanood. Kaya ang views ng video, umabot na ng higit 1 milyon. Kwento ng presidente ng grupong Alta na nag-organize ng liga, gusto lang naman daw nilang magpasaya.
May LGBT na po talaga every year ng pag magfe-fiesta. So, maganda siguro pag magba-basketball yung mga bakla kasi hindi pa ito na i-establish or hindi pa ito nagagawa sa aming barangay. So,
maulan man, dinayo pa rin ang paliga nila. Sure ball kasi ang saya.
Bahala na. Bahala na kahit masaktan kami. Basta yun lang, matawa lang yung mga tao. Wala na kaming pake kung sino magdi-discriminate sa amin, sino mag-judge sa amin. Basta sa amin lang is gusto lang namin na sumaya yung mga tao.
Pero hindi lang naman daw sila dyan kilala. Involved kasi ang grupo nilang Alta sa ibang initiatives mula HIV seminars, feeding programs, maging tree planting activities.
Maybe because established na yung organization namin at naipapakita namin na hindi lang sa ganitong bagay kami nakakatulong na ibang tao, kundi
kaya ang mensahe nila,
hindi lang po tayo bakla lang, kundi bakla po tayo na may purpose dito sa buong.
Masarap sa pakiramdam ang makapagbigay ng ngiti sa muka ng iba. Pero paalala nila mas masarap sa pakiramdam ang hindi maging mapanghusga, syempre maging mabuti tayo sa kapwa. Mobile Journal, Denise Valdesancho po, hatid ang mukha ng balita.
Senator-elect Kiko Pangilinan sits down for a one-on-one interview on Long Take. In that interview, Pangilinan unveiled his top priorities in the 20th Congress. That includes doubling the agri budget, free breakfast for public school students, and pushing for a national farm-to-market strategy. He also weighed in on several political issues, including the looming impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. Catch the full interview with Senator-elect Pangilinan on Long Take, only here on One News.
Nasa TV ka, oh. Parang ako kahapon nasa TV ako eh. Ang galing naman.
7 p.m.
Kamusta naman ang interview mo? Okay naman?
Okay naman.
Madami kayong natutunan about agri. Yeah. Very passionate si Sen about that eh.
Agri. Pero medyo, panoorin na lang nila.
Wala naman teaser. Anyway, before we let you go, I'd like to leave everyone with a quote. It is not enough to win a war. It is more important to organize the peace. That's from Aristotle. And that wraps up today's episode of News and Views.
Join us again tomorrow. I'm Angela Lagunsad Castro.
I'm Angelo Castro III. We are One News.
All sides, all the time.